The grand hall of the Galactic Council floated silently above the blue clouds of CalorPrime. Its glass walls shimmered with reflected starlight, and tiny drones moved gently across the ceiling, recording every discussion for the galaxy's history archives. Inside that quiet dome, hundreds of beings from different worlds sat in curved rows, their eyes, large and small, glowing and dim, focused on the same figure standing in the center. He was human. Captain Elias Ward, the ambassador of Earth, stood tall and calm. His uniform was simple, yet it carried the weight of his people's journey across the stars. Around him, the representatives of countless alien species studied every move, every breath, as if trying to understand what made this fragile-looking species so powerful in spirit. Among them sat Lyra, a young Kalorian researcher. Her soft blue skin reflected the golden light of the hall, and her silver eyes were full of curiosity. She was not like most members of her kind, who preferred to avoid emotional matters. Lyra was fascinated by humans, their stories, their mistakes, their endless courage. To her, they were a mystery made of warmth and chaos. For weeks, she had watched Elias during council meetings, always calm, always speaking with kindness even when others spoke against him. There was something strange about the way he talked. His words were not just sound. They carried meaning that touched the heart, and that was something Lyra did not understand. Today's session was supposed to be routine. The Council was reviewing Earth's membership request into the Intergalactic Union. Most species saw humans as unpredictable, too emotional, and too dangerous to be trusted with interstellar power. But Lyra, she saw something more. When the session ended and the others began leaving, she stayed seated, her thoughts tangled like threads. Elias was still standing near the central platform, organizing his notes. The hall had grown quiet now, except for the gentle hum of floating lights. Lyra hesitated, her hands trembling slightly. Then she stood up and walked toward him. "Captain Elias?" she said softly. He looked up, smiling politely. "Ah, Miss Lyra, you're from Kalor's science division, aren't you?" "Yes," she said, her voice unsure but clear. I wanted to ask you something." Elias nodded encouragingly. "Of course. Ask whatever you like." Lyra took a deep breath. For a moment, her mind warned her not to say it, but curiosity had already taken over her fear. "Why do humans fight for others who are not their kind?" she asked quietly. "It doesn't make sense. You risk yourselves for strangers, even for species that do not share your blood or world. Why?" The question hung in the air like a soft echo. The hall, once filled with noise, now felt sacredly silent. Even the lights seemed to pause. Elias studied her face. He could see that her question was not political or scientific. It was pure and innocent. It came from a heart that truly wanted to understand. He smiled gently and said, "Because we know what pain feels like." Lyra blinked. "Pain?" "Yes," he said slowly. "Because we've suffered ourselves. When you've felt hunger, you don't want others to starve. When you've known loss, you understand what someone else is going through. So when we see another being in danger, even if they are not human, something inside us refuses to stand still. We remember what it's like to need help, and we act." Lyra's silver eyes widened. She had studied human biology, psychology, and even their wars, but she had never heard it explained like this. It wasn't logic. It wasn't strategy. It was feeling, Elias continued. Maybe it's foolish sometimes. Maybe we help even when we shouldn't. But it's part of who we are. Our stories, our songs, even our mistakes. They all come from that same place. The wish that no one should face the dark alone. For a long time, Lyra said nothing. Her mind tried to translate his words into the patterns of Kalorian logic, but it couldn't. There was no formula for empathy. Finally, she whispered, "That is not what I expected." Elias chuckled softly. "Most people don't. They think humans fight because we love conflict. But that's not true. We fight because we love peace, and sometimes peace has to be protected." Lyra looked down, her heart beating faster. She felt something she had never experienced before. Her people were not emotional. They valued balance and reason. But now, inside her chest, something new was growing, a quiet warmth she couldn't name. She thanked him and walked back slowly to her seat. Elias watched her go, sensing that his words had reached somewhere deep. Above them, the Council's high cameras had recorded everything. Across the galaxy, those few words, spoken in a quiet hall, would soon travel through channels, networks, and minds. In the following days, the video spread among scholars and citizens of many worlds. Some called Elias's words inspiring, others found them dangerous. Empathy, they said, could break the perfect order of logical societies. Yet for many it awakened questions they never dared to ask. On CalorPrime, Lyra spent nights reviewing the footage again and again. She replayed the moment he said, "We act because we know pain." Each time she heard it, her heart seemed to respond. It was as if his words carried a small spark that refused to fade. Her mentor, Professor Talon, noticed the change. "You've been distracted lately," he said one evening as they studied energy maps. "Is this about the human?" Lyra looked embarrassed. "I just don't understand him. He speaks with feeling, not logic." "That is their nature," Talon replied, his tone cautious. "And it is exactly why the Council should be careful. Emotion leads to chaos. It clouds reason. But isn't feeling a kind of truth too?" she asked quietly. Talon paused, surprised by her question. "Truth has no need for emotion," he said. "Facts are enough." Lyra fell silent. Yet inside she disagreed. Elias's words had made her see that emotion was not weakness, it was connection. That night she opened her personal log and began to write. "Humans are strange. They feel deeply, even when it hurts them. I used to believe logic ruled all things. But now I wonder if there is something beyond calculation, something that binds life itself." A few days later, Lyra attended another council session. This time everyone seemed tense. Reports had come in from distant systems. Smaller species were discussing the human concept of compassion. Some worlds had even started using human phrases like stand together and hope beyond fear. The chair of the council frowned as he addressed Elias. "Your words have caused disturbance across several sectors. You speak of emotion as if it were strength. Do you realize how unstable that idea is?" Elias stood calmly. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. But perhaps the galaxy needed a reminder that logic alone cannot comfort a child and reason alone cannot heal a broken world." Murmurs filled the chamber. Some delegates nodded slowly. Others looked uneasy. Lyra watched silently, her heart torn between admiration and fear. She knew this moment would be remembered for centuries. When the session ended, she approached Elias again. "Do you regret what you said?" she asked. He smiled gently. "No. Truth doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. Your words are spreading," she said. "Some are afraid of them. Then maybe they need to hear them even more," he replied. Lyra felt that same warmth again. She realized she was not just studying humans anymore, she was learning from them. And though she didn't know it yet, her innocent question had started something far bigger than curiosity. It had started change. That night, as CalorPrime turned beneath the twin moons, Lyra looked up at the stars. Each point of light now seemed alive with meaning. She wondered how many hearts across the galaxy were thinking about the same thing she was. The strange, powerful human idea that feeling could be strength. And somewhere, far above in orbit, Elias looked down from his quarters aboard the Earth Embassy station. He didn't know how his words were spreading. He had only answered a question honestly. But deep inside he felt that something important had begun. Something no law, no council, and no distance could stop. For Lyra, it had been just a question. For the galaxy, it was the beginning of a new era. And for humanity, it was proof that their greatest power was not in their machines or armies, but in their hearts. The stars above CalorPrime shone brighter than usual that week. Or maybe it only felt that way because the galaxy itself had begun to stir. What had started as a single conversation, a young alien's innocent question and a human's heartfelt answer, was now spreading through every communication channel in the Union. The Council tried to calm the situation. They said it was just a misunderstanding, a cultural difference. But people everywhere kept asking the same question that Lyra had asked. Why do humans fight for others who are not their kind? And just as quickly, Elias's recorded reply was being repeated in schools, in worker camps, even in quiet temples on distant moons. Lyra did not expect it to spread this far. She was a scientist, not a speaker of revolutions. But every time she replayed the recording, she felt something stir inside her again. A kind of gentle flame that no logic could explain. Her research station had grown unusually busy. Dozens of scholars came to her for interviews, curious about her talk with the human ambassador. Some treated it like a scandal, others like a miracle. Did he really say emotion can guide strength? One asked. Yes, Lyra replied softly. He said feeling pain helps humans understand others. Absurd, another scoffed. Pain is a weakness. Lyra simply smiled. Perhaps it depends on how you carry it. Late one evening, Lyra walked alone through the crystal corridors of the Kalorian Science Hall. Outside the glass walls, lightning danced across the far horizon. Bright blue threads twisting through the storm clouds. She stopped by a glowing panel and opened a private communication link. Captain Elias Ward, she said, her voice echoing softly. After a moment, his face appeared on the holographic screen. He looked tired, but his smile was genuine. Lyra, it's good to see you again. How are things on CalorPrime? Busy, she said honestly. Your answer has become the most discussed topic in the Union. Some are calling it the human spark. He chuckled. That sounds dramatic. It is, she admitted, smiling faintly. The Council is worried. They think emotions might spread like a contagion. Elias leaned back thoughtfully. Maybe they're right, but not in a bad way. Maybe compassion should spread. Lyra looked at him carefully. Do you believe emotions can change an entire galaxy? He nodded. They already have many times back on Earth. Every time someone chose kindness over fear, the world shifted even a little. Maybe that's what's happening here too. Lyra lowered her gaze. My people think emotion clouds reason. And yet, Elias said softly, reason without compassion is hollow. The galaxy runs on logic, but it lives on feeling. His words lingered in her mind long after the call ended. The next morning, the council called for an emergency assembly. The room filled with tension. Representatives from more than 50 worlds gathered to discuss what they now called the human influence. Counselor Vareth, a tall being from the world of Azan, spoke first. The humans have spread emotional instability through the networks. Their ideas are infecting young minds. This must stop before order collapses. Elias remained calm as he listened. When the chair finally turned to him, he stood up slowly. With respect, Counselor, humanity doesn't seek to cause chaos. We only shared who we are. Is it truly dangerous to care for others? A low murmur filled the chamber. Vareth replied sharply, caring for others leads to unpredictability, and unpredictability leads to conflict. Elias smiled faintly. So does fear. The room fell silent again. Lyra watched from the audience, her heart pounding. Elias's quiet courage amazed her. He didn't argue with anger. He spoke with calm conviction that seemed to melt through walls of logic. The chair finally said, we will observe further human behavior before deciding on restrictions. The meeting ended without resolution, but Lyra could feel something shifting. The question had become more than curiosity. It had become a test for the whole galaxy. Days turned into weeks. Across the stars, strange things began to happen. On a mining colony near Vega, human workers helped an alien team repair a reactor after a storm, refusing to rest until the locals were safe. One of the aliens, a gruff engineer named Trow, later told a reporter, they nearly froze helping us. We offered them payment, but they just smiled and said, you do the same. I don't think I would have, until now. On another world, a group of students from different species started a movement called the Circle of Light, promoting empathy and unity. They quoted Elias's words as their motto, we act because we know pain. Even on CalorPrime, known for its emotionless society, small changes appeared. People began greeting each other with warmth rather than formality. Some even laughed openly, a sound once considered childish. Lyra watched these shifts with wonder. Her small lab became the center of a quiet revolution. Every new report she received filled her heart with both hope and worry. Her mentor, Professor Talon, grew uneasy. This is getting out of control, he told her one evening. Do you understand what you've done? I only asked a question, Lyra said softly. And look what it caused, Talon replied. The Council fears that the balance of our society will break. They are planning to restrict all human communications until things return to normal. Lyra's eyes widened. They can't do that. Humans haven't done anything wrong. Maybe not intentionally, Talon said, but their influence is powerful. Too powerful. Lyra left the room without replying. Her heart felt heavy. Could understanding truly be dangerous? That night she received a secret message from Elias. It was short and calm, but the words carried warmth. Don't lose faith. Lyra. Change always looks like chaos before it becomes light. She read it several times before replying. I'm afraid they'll ban your people. Then we'll wait, Elias answered. But they can't ban ideas. They live inside hearts. His message gave her strength. She decided to continue her research in secret. She wanted to know if empathy, the human spark, could be measured, shared, or even learned. For days she studied recordings of human brain waves during emotional moments. The results were unlike anything in Calorian science. When humans felt compassion, their neural energy didn't just increase, it radiated outward, creating synchronized waves that influenced nearby minds. She called it echo resonance. Her first experiment was simple. She played a recording of a human child laughing inside a room full of emotionless sensors. To her surprise, the sensors reacted. Faint energy pulses appeared, as if the room itself had caught a trace of joy. When she repeated the experiment with alien volunteers, something amazing happened. They smiled. Not because of humor or command, but because they felt it. Lyra couldn't believe it. It's contagious, she whispered. Empathy can spread like light. She sent her data to Elias. He replied quickly, his words filled with quiet excitement. Lyra, this is what I hoped for. Maybe emotion isn't a weakness, it's a bridge. But not everyone saw it that way. Within a week, the Council's security branch arrived at Lyra's lab. They demanded her research files and sealed her equipment. The lead officer spoke coldly. Your studies are unauthorized. The Union cannot allow emotional interference in scientific systems. Lyra stood firm. I wasn't creating interference. I was discovering truth. The officer frowned. Truth must serve order. Her data was confiscated. But they didn't realize she had backups hidden inside her personal console. That night, she looked up at the dark sky again, her heart heavy but determined. They can take my machines, she whispered, but not what I've learned. Far above, on the orbiting Earth embassy, Elias also felt the growing tension. Reports reached him daily, some hopeful, some fearful. He had become both symbol and threat, but he didn't regret his words. To him, the galaxy was simply waking up. A week later, something unexpected happened. A distant outpost on the edge of the Union sent a distress call. A meteor storm had struck their power core, leaving dozens trapped inside. The nearest rescue fleet was hours away. But before anyone could organize a mission, a small Earthship, crewed by humans, jumped to the site. They had picked up the signal and acted instantly. Despite the danger, they risked their own lives to save beings they had never met. The event was broadcast live across the networks. Viewers watched in silence as humans worked tirelessly, pulling survivors from wreckage, sharing their oxygen, and refusing to leave until everyone was safe. When it ended, the galaxy had witnessed something undeniable. The spark was not just words, it was real. Even the Council could not ignore it. Lyra watched the broadcast with tears shining in her silver eyes. Her heart whispered, he was right. The next morning, she sent a single message to Elias. Your words are no longer just sound. They have become light. Elias smiled when he read it. And light, he said softly to himself, always finds a way to spread. The galaxy had changed quietly. What began as a single conversation between Lyra and the human ambassador had now become a soft wave of emotion, spreading through distant worlds. People still worked, traded, and debated as before, but something new lived inside their hearts. A small understanding that compassion could be strength. Yet not everyone was happy about this change. Inside the towering white halls of the Galactic Council, a secret meeting was taking place. The chamber lights were dimmed, the room sealed from all communication signals. Only the highest-ranking members of the Council sat around the circular table. Councillor Vareth, the same one who had argued against Elias before, spoke in a sharp tone. This human effect has gone too far. Entire colonies are questioning our laws. Some species refuse to follow orders because they claim they must follow their hearts. This cannot continue. The chair of the council listened in silence before asking, And what do you suggest, Councillor Vareth? We must test them, Vareth said firmly. If humans truly act out of pure emotion, let us see if that emotion can be trusted. We will create a controlled experiment. A scenario that forces their instincts to choose. The others murmured softly. A test sounded dangerous, but curiosity was stronger than fear. After a long pause, the chair nodded. Very well. Prepare the simulation. But it must appear real. The human must not know. A few days later, Captain Elias Ward received an invitation to visit the Council's advanced research station orbiting above CalorPrime. The message said they wanted to study human decision-making under stress for peaceful research purposes. Elias accepted with his usual calm smile. He trusted the Council even after their arguments. He believed that understanding came from openness. Lyra, however, felt uneasy when she heard about it. She met him before his shuttle launch, her silver eyes full of worry. Something feels wrong, she said softly. The Council has been secretive lately. Please be careful. Elias chuckled gently. Don't worry, Lyra. They only want to learn. I'll be fine. I hope so, she replied, but her heart told her otherwise. The research station was a marvel of technology, a floating city made of crystal and steel. When Elias arrived, he was greeted by scientists and security officers who treated him politely, but distantly. They guided him into a large chamber filled with glowing panels and floating drones. At the center was a transparent pod. Inside it, a detailed holographic environment was being prepared. Mountains, storms, and ruins. It looked completely real. This is a simulation chamber, explained one of the scientists. We will place you inside to observe your natural reactions during a rescue scenario. Elias raised an eyebrow. A rescue scenario? Yes, the scientist replied quickly. We want to study your decision-making under pressure. He agreed without hesitation. All right. If it helps you understand humans better, I'm ready. The pod sealed around him and the light dimmed. Inside the simulation, Elias found himself standing on a rocky field under a dark, stormy sky. Lightning cracked in the distance. The wind was cold, carrying the faint sound of cries for help. His instincts immediately sharpened. Hello? He called out. Through the rain, he saw a figure trapped under debris, a small alien child, its soft skin glowing faintly. The child's voice trembled. Please, help me. Elias rushed forward without a second thought. He tried lifting the rocks, but they were too heavy. He tore off parts piece by piece, his hands bleeding where sharp edges cut through. The simulation was so real that even the pain felt genuine. Above, in the observation room, the Council watched silently. Lyra stood behind the glass wall, her heart racing. She hadn't been told what kind of test this was until now. When she saw the terrified child inside the simulation, her stomach twisted. That's not an experiment, it's cruelty, she whispered. But no one answered her. Back inside the pod, Elias kept working. The rain poured harder and the ground shook. A warning appeared in the holographic sky. Structural collapse in 30 seconds. He knew he could escape if he ran. But the child would die. He took a deep breath, placed his hands under the last large rock and pushed with all his strength. The storm roared. Finally, the debris shifted enough for the child to crawl free. Elias smiled with relief. Go, he shouted. Run to safety. The child hesitated. What about you? I'll catch up. Elias replied, but the ground beneath him gave way. He fell into a pit as the simulation ended in a flash of white light. When the chamber opened, the air was quiet again. Elias lay on the floor, breathing heavily, covered in sweat. His palms were raw from the effort. Slowly, he sat up and looked at the Council through the glass. Well, he said between breaths, did I pass your test? The scientists were speechless. Even the cold-hearted Counselor Vareth couldn't hide his astonishment. Lyra rushed forward, ignoring the guards. You knew, didn't you? She asked softly. You knew it wasn't real. Elias gave a small, tired smile. Yes, the air didn't taste right. The shadows moved wrong, but a cry for help is still a cry for help. Real or not, I couldn't ignore it. Lyra's eyes glistened. She had no words. Vareth stepped closer to the glass. You risked your life for an illusion. That was pointless. Elias looked at him calmly. Maybe, but our choices define us, not the outcome. If my instincts tell me to help, then I'll help, even in a dream. The room fell silent. After the test, the Council adjourned in private to discuss the results. Some argued that the human response proved dangerous levels of emotional influence. Others quietly said it proved something greater, true empathy. In the end, they decided to keep the results hidden from the public, afraid of what such knowledge could inspire. But secrets never stay buried forever. Lyra managed to access the simulation recordings before they were sealed. She watched the footage alone, her heart heavy with emotion. She saw the way Elias had struggled, how he smiled through exhaustion, how he risked everything for a child that wasn't even real. "This," she whispered, "is what makes them different." She began compiling a new report titled The Spark of Humanity, Emotional Response Beyond Logic. It was dangerous work. If caught, she could lose her research position, maybe even be exiled. But she didn't care anymore. The galaxy needed to see the truth. Days later, Lyra met Elias secretly in the quiet gardens near the embassy dome. The artificial trees swayed gently under a glowing sky. "They tested you," she said. "They wanted to prove humans were reckless." Elias nodded. "I figured as much. But you showed them something else," she continued. "You proved that empathy doesn't need proof. It just acts." Elias looked out at the stars above. "That's what I've always believed. Sometimes we help not because it's logical, but because it's right. Maybe that's what makes us human." Lyra smiled faintly. "Then maybe that's what can make us all better." They sat in silence for a while, watching the lights of orbiting ships pass across the sky like fireflies. Lyra finally said, "I think the galaxy is beginning to change, Captain. Your words, your actions, they've started something that cannot be undone." Elias looked thoughtful. "Change is never easy. But once it begins, no one can stop it. Not even fear." That night in her lab, Lyra received messages from other scientists across the stars, quiet whispers of support. Some said they wanted to study this spark. Others shared stories of small acts of kindness between species that once hated each other. The idea was spreading again, faster than before. And though the council tried to silence it, people had already seen the footage of Elias's test. Someone inside the station had leaked it. The image of a human saving an alien child, even inside a simulation, became a symbol of hope. Across the galaxy, citizens repeated the phrase Elias had said during the trial. "Real or not, the choice still shows who we are." In a distant communication hall, Counselor Vareth watched the spreading news with frustration. "He's not a man," he muttered bitterly. "He's a storm." The chair of the council replied quietly, "No, he's a mirror, and we are only now seeing what we've become." Far above the clouds, Elias stood on the balcony of the Earth Embassy. Below him, CalorPrime glittered with countless city lights. Lyra's last words echoed in his mind. "You proved that empathy doesn't need proof." He smiled softly and whispered to the stars, "If understanding begins with one question, maybe peace begins with one answer." The wind carried his words into the night, and somewhere, far beyond the reach of politics and fear, hearts began to listen. The stars of the Union space shone quietly, but something invisible moved between them. An idea, a feeling, a spark. It began in whispers and shared recordings and the retelling of one man's simple words. "Real or not, the choice still shows who we are. No law could stop it. No barrier could contain it." The spark was spreading. Lyra sat alone in her small lab on CalorPrime, watching the glowing screens before her. Messages arrived faster than she could read them. Scientists from other worlds, engineers, teachers, and even soldiers, all wanted to talk about the same thing, the human ability to feel deeply. One message came from a scholar on the icy world of Theros. "We tried to repeat your experiment. It worked. The energy of empathy travels between minds. We call it light resonance." Another message arrived from a trader colony. Two species that once refused to speak now work together. They said they watched the human rescue footage and could not hate anymore. Lyra's heart filled with quiet pride. She remembered Elias's calm voice, his steady eyes. He had once said, "Maybe compassion should spread," and now it truly was. But with change came resistance. The Galactic Council had not been silent. New restrictions were announced. All emotional research was to be paused, and the broadcast of human material was to be limited. They feared chaos. They feared losing control. Yet the more they tried to stop it, the more people wanted to learn. At the Council's communication tower, Counselor Vareth stood before a large holographic map of the Union. Red lights blinked across hundreds of systems, each representing a place where the spark had taken hold. "This must end," he said coldly. "The humans are turning our people against order." The chair of the council looked tired. Perhaps not against order, she said softly, but against fear. And maybe that is not such a bad thing. Vareth frowned. You sound like them. The chair turned to him. Maybe I am beginning to understand them. For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, the stars continued to burn, uncaring of the council's debates. Meanwhile, on the other side of CalorPrime, Lyra was not alone anymore. A small group of young researchers had joined her secretly. They called themselves the Circle of Light. Together, they studied human empathy and its strange energy patterns. Their lab was hidden deep within the lower levels of the science hall, a quiet place no one visited. The air smelled of metal and hope. Lyra watched as one of her assistants, a small green-skinned being named Tiro, placed his hands on a scanner. Think about something kind, she instructed. He closed his eyes. The machine hummed. Blue light began to glow around his palms. The readings climbed higher than before. It's working, Lyra said with amazement. You're not human, but your energy pattern is the same. Tiro smiled shyly. Maybe kindness doesn't belong to one species. Lyra nodded slowly. Maybe it belongs to life itself. As weeks passed, reports continued to pour in. Whole communities were changing. On a desert world, rival tribes who had fought for generations signed a peace pact after hearing the story of the human rescue simulation. On a space station near Vega, mixed crews started sharing meals together, laughing and learning from one another. Even some machines, advanced AIs programmed with human empathy, began showing unexpected emotional behavior, protecting their crews beyond their programming. Lyra collected every report, building a massive archive called the Chronicle of the Spark. It contained stories, recordings, and proof that emotion could unite what logic had divided. But not everyone saw it as progress. Professor Talon, Lyra's former mentor, confronted her one evening. His face, normally calm, was full of frustration. You are playing with dangerous forces, he said. Emotions are unpredictable. They can bring unity, yes, but also destruction. Lyra looked at him sadly. So can reason if it lacks heart. We have tried living without feeling for centuries. Did it make us happier? Talon had no answer. He turned away, muttering, The Council will not allow this to continue. A few days later, security forces raided several labs connected to the Circle of Light. Many researchers were questioned. Some were threatened. The Council claimed they were protecting mental stability across the Union. Lyra knew it was fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of change. She managed to hide her main data before they arrived. With help from Tiro, she encrypted the entire archive and sent a copy to a safe location, the Earth Embassy orbiting above the planet. When the raid ended, she stood by the shattered window of her lab looking at the twin moons of Kalor. Her world had always been peaceful, but now she saw how fragile peace could be when truth was feared. And yet, despite everything, she smiled, because she knew the spark had already escaped beyond anyone's reach. At the same time, Elias Ward watched the same moons from the balcony of the Earth Embassy. He had received Lyra's encrypted files earlier that night. As he read through the reports, his heart swelled with emotion. He whispered to himself, she did it. She kept it alive. But his celebration was short-lived. An urgent message flashed on his communicator. The Council had declared an emergency meeting about human influence. Rumors said they were planning to ban Earth from the Union entirely. Elias sighed and straightened his jacket. Then it's time to speak again, he said quietly. The council hall was full. Every seat was taken. The moment Elias entered, all eyes turned to him. Some were filled with respect, others with suspicion. Councillor Vareth stood and began his speech. Human behavior is dangerous. It spreads without control. It weakens discipline and logic. We must restrict human presence to protect the Union. Elias listened without interrupting. When Vareth finished, the hall fell silent. Then Elias spoke. His voice was calm, but each word carried the strength of truth. I understand your fear, he said. Change is never easy. But emotion is not a weapon, it's a bridge. You fear that compassion will make you weak, but it is fear itself that makes civilizations fall. He paused, letting the silence grow heavy. When we first reached the stars, we thought we were alone. But we learned that every life, no matter its shape or color, feels pain, joy, and hope. If we can share those things, then we can share peace too. Some council members lowered their heads. Others whispered softly among themselves. Even the chair seemed moved, but Vareth looked angry. Fine words, human. But peace built on feeling can collapse with a single heartbreak. Elias turned toward him. Maybe. But a peace built on fear will never live at all. The hall fell completely silent. Lyra watched the broadcast from her small quarters, her heart pounding. She felt proud, afraid, and inspired all at once. Elias's words touched her deeply. Moments later, her communicator buzzed. It was a message from Elias. Whatever happens next, remember this: hope is not born in safety. It's born when someone dares to care. Tears filled her eyes. He never gives up, she whispered. The council delayed their decision, unable to agree. But the delay itself was enough. By then, the spark had already reached every corner of the galaxy. In the mines of Drathos, workers shared songs of unity. On the floating cities of Virali, artists painted humans surrounded by light. Even the Azen fleets, once ruled by cold efficiency, began adopting empathy protocols for commanders. The spark was no longer a rumor. It was a revolution of hearts. Weeks later, Lyra received another secret transmission. This time it wasn't from humans, but from dozens of species. They wanted to form a new group, an alliance of those who believed in compassion as a universal power. They asked Lyra to guide it. She hesitated at first. "I'm just a scientist," she said. A voice replied from the screen. So was the one who asked the question that started it all. Lyra smiled. "Then I suppose it's time to ask more questions." That night, she stood outside under the glowing skies of CalorPrime. The twin moons bathed the city in soft light. In the distance, ships from many worlds floated like silver birds above the horizon. She closed her eyes and remembered the day she had asked Elias her first question. Why do humans fight for others who are not their kind? Now she finally understood the answer with her heart, not just her mind. Because compassion wasn't just a human gift. It was the universe remembering its own light. Far above, Elias looked down from orbit, knowing the spark was alive in millions of souls. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy with power, but with kindness. He whispered softly. Lyra's question changed everything. Maybe that's how all great things begin, with a question asked in innocence and answered with heart. The stars blinked back, as if listening, and across the endless dark, the spark continued to spread, quiet, unstoppable, and full of hope. The universe was quiet but not silent. Everywhere hearts were awakening. The spark that began from one human's words now reached worlds that had never known compassion. The galaxy had started to feel, and nothing would ever be the same again. Lyra stood on the balcony of the newly built Harmony Station, a place where delegates from every species gathered. The large silver structure floated between stars, shining like a symbol of peace. Around her, banners from 100 different worlds waved gently in the artificial breeze. She took a deep breath, feeling both nervous and proud. In a few moments, she would address the first meeting of the Alliance of Light, a union formed not by fear or power, but by understanding. Tiro, her loyal assistant, walked up beside her. "You look worried," he said softly. Lyra smiled. "I'm not worried, just amazed. I never thought one question could lead us here." Tiro laughed quietly. "You asked the question. The human gave the answer. Together you changed everything." She nodded, her eyes warm with gratitude. "Yes, but now we must make sure it stays alive." Inside the grand hall, thousands of beings took their seats. There were scaled creatures from the desert worlds, shimmering beings of light from energy realms, and even small winged aliens that looked like floating crystals. In the center stood a simple podium. Lyra walked to it slowly. The crowd fell silent. "My friends," she began, her voice calm and clear. "We gather here not because of laws or commands, but because of choice. We have all felt something new in our hearts, something humans call empathy. It connects us. It reminds us that every life, no matter how different, has worth." A soft murmur spread through the hall. Her words touched something deep in every listener. Lyra continued. "When I first met Captain Elias Ward, I asked him a simple question. Why humans fight for others who are not their kind? His answer began a journey that led us here. He showed us that compassion is not weakness, but strength. And now we must carry that strength together." The audience broke into gentle applause, their eyes glowing with emotion. After the speech, Lyra returned to her quarters to rest. The room was quiet, filled with soft light. On the table lay a small communicator, blinking, an incoming message. She opened it, and a familiar face appeared. It was Elias Ward. He looked tired but peaceful, his human eyes full of kindness. "Lyra," he said with a smile. "I watched your speech. You did well. You've become the heart of something big." Lyra felt warmth in her chest. "I couldn't have done it without your words, Elias. The spark began with you." He shook his head. "No, it began with your question. You gave me a reason to speak from my soul." They both laughed softly. There was silence between them for a few seconds, but it wasn't an empty silence. It was full of shared memory and trust. Elias then said, "The council is still divided. Some want to stop this movement, but others, they're beginning to change. Maybe one day they'll join the alliance too." Lyra nodded. "Change takes time, but even the slowest star still shines." Elias smiled at her words. "You sound like a human poet now." "Maybe I learned from the best," she replied, her voice gentle. Days turned into weeks, and Harmony Station became a symbol of hope. Every day, new members joined the Alliance of Light. They shared knowledge, art, and kindness. Old conflicts began to fade. Even children from different worlds played together in the open plazas, laughing in languages no one had heard before. Yet deep in space, trouble was still stirring. A few powerful leaders from old empires were afraid of the new peace. They believed that emotions made societies weak. They gathered fleets and whispered about rebellion. Lyra heard the reports and felt a shadow of worry. But Elias, now Earth's ambassador at large, sent her a message. "Fear always tries to return, but courage must rise again. Don't lose faith." So she didn't. One evening, the stars outside Harmony Station flickered strangely. A fleet appeared, old warships from the Orion Dominion, a group that had rejected the spark. They demanded the Alliance disband immediately. Their leader, a tall armored alien named General Korath, appeared on the main screen. "Emotions divide. Compassion weakens," he declared. "We offer you one choice: surrender the humans and their followers or face destruction." The hall filled with whispers. Many delegates looked frightened. Lyra stood, her heart racing but her voice steady. "General Korath, humanity has taught us something powerful, that compassion builds strength, not weakness. We will not surrender to fear." The general's cold eyes narrowed. "Then you choose ruin." Before anyone could respond, another voice joined the channel. Elias Ward. His ship had arrived. "This is Captain Ward of the United Earth vessel Solace," he said. "We don't come to fight. We come to remind you that even in darkness, light survives. You can join us or you can live alone in fear, but you cannot stop what has already begun." Korath hesitated. Around him, his crew looked uneasy. They had all heard stories of the spark, stories of peace, hope, and unity. Slowly, one by one, the ships began to turn away. Korath scowled but gave the order to retreat. "You may have won this time, human, but the galaxy is not ready for your feelings," Elias simply replied. "Then we'll wait for it to be." The screen went dark. Cheers filled the hall. Lyra sighed with relief, tears of gratitude in her eyes. The crisis had passed without bloodshed. Later that night, she met Elias in person aboard the Solace. The two walked along the observation deck, looking out at the vast field of stars. "It feels strange," Lyra said softly, "to win a battle without fighting." Elias nodded. "That's the best kind of victory, when you change hearts, not destroy them." She smiled. "You really believe this peace will last?" He looked at the stars thoughtfully. "Peace is not something you keep. It's something you build again and again. But as long as people remember what matters, it will never die." Lyra felt hope rise in her chest. She reached out and touched the glass, watching the reflection of countless worlds. "Then we'll keep building," she whispered. Months passed and the spark continued to grow. The Alliance spread across hundreds of systems. New schools were built where children of all species learned together. Medicine, art, and technology advanced faster than ever before because minds now worked in harmony. Not competition, Elias and Lyra became symbols of unity. One human, one alien, both forever linked by a single question and a single answer. Everywhere they went, people repeated the same words that had started it all. Why do humans fight for others who are not their kind? And the answer always followed, because it shows who we are. Years later, long after the first meeting of the Alliance, Lyra stood once again on the same balcony where she had given her first speech. The stars looked the same, yet she knew the galaxy was different now. Tiro, older but still cheerful, stood beside her. "The Council finally recognized Earth as the heart of the Alliance," he said proudly. Lyra smiled. "It was always their heart. We just needed to listen." She looked down at the small device in her hand, a hollow recording from Elias, who had returned to Earth to help guide the next generation. His message played softly. "If one question can change the stars, imagine what one act of kindness can do." Her eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy. "He was right," she whispered. "It was never just a question. It was the beginning of everything." That night she recorded her final entry in the Chronicle of the Spark. "We have learned that knowledge builds progress, but compassion builds civilization. The galaxy is no longer cold. The stars shine a little brighter because hearts now understand each other. One human answer changed us, and now the spark belongs to everyone." She sent the message to every world in the Alliance. Within days, people began sending back their own messages, songs, stories, and memories inspired by hope. And somewhere far away, on a quiet hill on Earth, Elias Ward looked up at the night sky. He saw the faint shimmer of Harmony Station orbiting among the stars and smiled. He whispered softly. She asked the question, and the universe finally listened. The wind moved through the trees, carrying his words upward, toward the same stars that had once seemed cold and distant. Now, they seemed alive, glowing with warmth, with empathy, with the light of countless hearts connected by understanding. And so, the spark lived on, not in machines or weapons, but in choices, in kindness, and in the endless courage to care, because sometimes it only takes an innocent question to change everything.